and welcome to episode 32 of the Actual Astronomy Podcast. I'm Chris, and with me, as always, is Shane. How are you this afternoon, Shane?
I'm good. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. So we talked a little bit in episode 31 about our preparations for observing in the Grasslands National Park, which is pretty much about the darkest place in Canada to do astronomy. And in this one, I think you want to talk a little bit about like packing for camping and what eyepieces, filters, telescopes, binoculars, atlases, et cetera, that we may choose to bring along with us. So with that, I will, kind of let you lead this one.
Yeah, sure. So I think a little while ago we talked about preparing to observe, and I believe you categorized it in three different ways. Sort of backyard observing, medium, and then long distance. Medium distance would be you're just going out like what we did last night for cometary observing, where you're out for an hour or maybe 2 or 3 hours, but you end the night back in your bed because you're not that far from home. However, when you and I do some real dark sky observing, we're traveling 2.5 to 3.5 hours away. And we, usually go for a few days. We bring all of our gear, and where we like to go, it's very dark because there's not a lot of people or amenities there. Hotels, restaurants, things like that bring in light, and you're probably not going to go to those locations for really good astronomy.
Yeah.
So where we go, we really have to bring everything that we will need, and some planning in advance is usually helpful because you don't want to bring everything you own from like all of your astronomy gear because you probably won't use all of it while you're there. So I thought we could talk just a little bit about what our plans are while we're there, and what we might bring or what we usually bring on these types of trips.
You know what the most important thing to take is on just about any trip where you're really uncertain or conditions might be sketchy or somewhat remote. You know what one of the most important things to bring is?
Binoculars?
No, toilet paper. So
yes, you're right.
so you laugh, and people might think that's funny, like in light of the recent toilet paper hoarding, and I guess depending on what side of the paper you come down on, whether you're a hoarder or one seeking out paper, we treaded a pretty fine line on that one. So we were not well stocked, and sort of just screwed it through, but. When I was studying in university, I would go and I did some archaeological expeditions, and I had done a fair bit of traveling and kind of some pretty rough stuff as far as accommodations and that went. And I was pretty certain one of the places we were going once would not have toilet paper, and so I had put all this toilet paper in my huge duffel bag. And I remember. The girlfriend I had traveling with me, she was like laughing at me and she thought I was being ridiculous. And then when we got to the place, you're a pretty big hero when you're the person that has the toilet paper and there's like no toilet paper to be found, right? So anyhow, but yeah, I mean, and it can come in handy, for like a whole variety of things when you're in the wilderness. So yeah, I always try to make sure that I have a little bit on hand,
Yeah. The other thing for me that might not always be readily apparent is the food that I pack is really important to me. You're not getting the best of sleeps when you're out camping on an astronomy trip because you're staying up super late, and then you're probably not sleeping in too far into the morning because the sun comes up, it heats up your tent, and it's just not very pleasant.
Yeah.
So because of all of the discomfort that you experience during one of these trips, having some nice meals to look forward to really helps my energy and helps my mood an awful lot too. So
I have noticed this. I just want to say that I have noticed that you bring some pretty fine food with you. I mean, like between you and Mike, like you guys really bring it when it comes to food. Like sometimes I'm there just eating like freeze dried whatever because I'll bring some food. I have some food restrictions, so it's not as easy for me anyway. But I've looked over and seen you cooking like a salmon on your Coleman grill.
Yeah, I do enjoy stuffed salmon wheels occasionally and things like that. But it's the other thing too. Like, there's something about going out into somewhat of the wilderness, going into nature.
Yeah.
And it's probably when you take away some of your luxuries that you're used to in life, air conditioning, a comfortable couch,
A roof.
a roof. Yeah. I think that some other things in life become just more enjoyable. Your
Yeah.
senses are either heightened, or I'm not sure what it is, but you know, uh, um, having some salmon, which I enjoy all of the time, just seems to taste better when I'm cooking it on my Coleman grill in the Grasslands National Parks.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, while I plan a lot about the astronomical side of things, I plan an awful lot for my comfort as well. So I bring an awful lot of clothing, because you never know how cold it's going to get at
Yeah.
some of these remote locations. And part of that is the weather stations around the country. They don't have a lot of sensors and things like that in these remote areas, so
Yeah.
sometimes it's just hard to predict or forecast the weather that will actually happen there. And what forecasts exist, you kind of have to take them with a grain of salt, because the accuracy isn't what you're used to at home. So while it
Yeah.
may say, and you and I have experienced this many times, in
Well,
fact, was it
yeah.
last October?
I feel like there may be some daggers coming from you towards me on this one.
Not at all. Not at all. There's no ill will on my part, but I think it was last October, or was it the year
It
before?
was the year before, yeah, and
Yeah,
it
yeah,
looked so like it was so nice. It was almost 20 degrees, or maybe it was even 20 degrees. And I mean, gee, like we definitely have gone down to grasslands when it hasn't been as nice as it was that day. And the forecast low was sort of -1 or 2 or 3, maybe. Like it wasn't
it was
really
right
going
at,
to be super cold. And you and I
no.
have done -4, -6 even, which is kind of like my limit is sort of -5, -6. And I thought, well, that night our plan was to not really observe much in the evening because the moon was up or whatever. And we wanted to observe like the winter sky in October, and you got to wait until after midnight or so. And so, the method to our madness there was that we would sleep while it was still warm, get up, make some coffee or whatever at like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and get in the car and warm up really good, and then do 3 or 4 hours of observing or whatever, have some breakfast and roll out and go home. Like that seemed like a pretty good plan. And then gee, it was like, what was it, like -5 by the time the sun went down? I mean, it was just brutal.
Oh, that was awful. Yeah. It was probably around the second week of October, I think. And like you said, the forecast looked really nice for that time of the year, 20 degrees Celsius. I think the overnight low was, yeah, right around, 0 or a couple degrees below.
Nothing we can't
And
handle,
yeah, yeah,
and we were
totally.
even thinking that if it went twice as cold, like I think, like you said, it was -2 or -3, and we thought, well, even if it goes to -5 or -6, even -7, we'd be okay, because
Yeah.
we're only going to sleep half the night, and we'd be out and observing during the coldest part of the night anyway, so we wouldn't be trying to sleep then, so it wasn't going to be a problem.
Yeah, yeah, and then during twilight, so the sun had set, and you have normal twilight for about 30 minutes after that. I think the temperature dropped at least to like, it was well below zero at that point. And
Oh yeah.
about every 10 or 15 minutes, we were losing another degree, because I had that little Bluetooth temperature sensor
Yeah.
that we left outside. And anyway, the point of that is, you can't really trust some of these remote location weather
No.
forecasts. So come prepared, bring
Yeah.
warm clothing, bring warm sleeping bags. Uh, the cold is what will kill you. And it's much easier to take off a shirt or a jacket,
Yeah.
or to, throw your sleeping bag to the side if you're too warm. I've been very cold multiple times in a tent, and I never
Mm.
want to do that again. So I always am ready for that. And then also, like, some people look at me a little crazy, I think, when we start observing in grasslands early in the night, and I've got a toque, gloves, and a
Oh
winter
yeah.
jacket on, and it's a summer day in July.
Yeah.
Well, we've said it before.
You got to dress for
Uh,
20 degrees colder than what it is
exactly.
Celsius, yeah.
Yeah, so oftentimes it'll get in that part of the country, it'll go down to 10 to 0 degrees. It's quite
Yeah.
common.
Yeah.
So, I'm dressing for -10 to -20 Celsius.
Yeah.
And that keeps me comfortable most of the night. But even with that, after a few hours and it's 2 in the morning, I'm starting to feel the cold a little bit even at that. And
Yeah,
then
because
it's
we're not
time to
moving
go
or
to bed.
anything. Yeah, we're not moving around or anything. But you know, that night, and you and I, we decided to, you know, cut our losses and head home before it got too late and too cold. And that night went to -20 with the wind chill down there. So I felt like we made the right decision that night. I think it could have been an interesting experiment. I'm sure we would have survived, but I don't know how much observing we would have done that night. I think probably if we had gone to bed, we might have slept for a couple hours and then just woken up so cold. And then, you know, by that point, it's the middle of the night. We would have had a, you know, a rough 3 or 4 hour wait till morning light to get out of there. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So
Exactly.
one of the things you introduced me to, this is really a miraculous device for camping. And so you were having some trouble getting you were talking about like not getting as good a sleep camping, and you went and got this air mattress. Do you want to just talk about this? Because this really is a big game changer. Now, I was reluctant because it is not inexpensive. It's going to cost you a stay at a 4-star hotel for one night to buy one of these things. But holy moly, like this absolutely was a game changer for me. So what did you end up getting for an air mattress?
Yeah. So I'm a side sleeper. And when we would go out to the grasslands, I would, and this is no exaggeration, I would wake up every 15 to 30 minutes, and I'd have to roll over because my shoulder and my hip were just killing me. So
Hmm.
I would do this all night. And when I say all night, that's not very long because we're observing till 2 or 3 in the morning. And you're
Yeah,
really only having 3 or 4, maybe 5 hours of sleep. So the sleep I was trying to get was so disruptive that I was just tired and miserable the next day. And after a couple of years of doing this, it really was to the point of I either need to solve this problem or I'm not coming to grasslands anymore to observe because it just wasn't enjoyable. And
yeah,
that's saying a lot because I love those trips. I love, the socialization that we do, and I love the observing. So
yeah.
I did a whole bunch of research and I
Now,
came
can I just sort
across,
of
oh yeah,
chime in with where I was in this? So you were sleeping on a pretty good like camping mat, and I was using like the Coleman inflatable, air mattress type deal that many people might be familiar with, and I was fine on the comfort side, but those things are like a heat sink, and so they just kind of pull the heat out of you. So while I was comfortable physically, I was temperature wise getting cold, like you were saying. You know, we've gone down into single digits or sometimes negative digits even in the summer where we go in this desert like environment. And then I was freezing, so you were waking up sort of sore and crabby, and I was waking up half frozen to death and crabby. So we were quite the pair in the morning when Mike would roll out of his trailer and look at us.
yeah. Well, yeah, like a normal air mattress, you kind of end up with convection currents in there. Your body is heating that top little bit of the air in the air
Mm,
mattress. The ground is cooling the air in there, and it just kind of circulates. And I don't think your body really overcomes the cold ground throughout the night.
no.
And especially when it does get cold out and you feel it.
Yeah.
However, we were able to solve this. I did a
Yes.
bunch of research online, and I came across the solution. At least that's what everybody said online. Various threads was if you buy this particular air mattress, all your problems go away.
And it
So the
just,
air
so
mattress.
so many times people say that, and I was really happy that you dropped the coin first and you were in the experiment.
Well, like I said, I was legitimately at the point where I was not going to come to grasslands anymore. I
And
did not want to. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I had pretty much stopped going when I knew it was going to be cold, like below
Mhm.
zero cold, because I knew that I would just, be so cold that, it just would drain the energy out of me, and I just wouldn't enjoy myself for another day or so.
Yeah. So what we ended up buying is called an Exped, so EXPED mattress, and I think we got the Mega Duo or something like that, or Duo Mega. I'm not sure what the heck the
It's
version is,
a
but
pinky red. You can't miss it
yeah.
by
So
Exped.
so just to describe this thing, It's huge, first of all. It's very long and wide. So, I'm a 6'3" person and it fits me quite well, which was important to me. It self-inflates, although you
You need to
usually
put
have
a
to top it up a little bit with the
yeah,
hand pump.
and that's sort of the neat thing, like coming from like the full on air, like I never even went to a regular decent camping mat first. I went right from the 1999 Coleman special, which really I actually found pretty comfortable, like I said. And if I was just camping in a warmer environment, I think I probably would have been fine to stick with that. I like how it kept me up a little bit higher off the ground than this, but yeah, but boy, it would be cold anyway. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the Exped self-inflates, but you have to top it up a little bit with this hand pump that they provide. But it's quite nice to actually do that. It's almost like the sleep by number mattresses. You can kind of get it as firm or as soft as you like it.
Hmm.
But what sets this thing apart from all of the other air mattresses out there is it has some kind of a foam inside of it. It's not just an empty air chamber.
Yeah.
So this foam uh, provides the proper support and cushioning for your body so you don't get those pains like I was getting if you're a side sleeper. But on top of that, it has the highest R value, so in insulation, measurements, highest R value of any camping air mattress, I think, in existence. Now, you know, I guess I should never state in all absolutes because I'm sure there's something out there that's better, but it's fantastic for comfort
Yeah, it's
and
supposed
it
to be
keeps you
good
warm.
to minus 40 or something, and I can certainly believe it.
Yeah, yeah. I love it. It's been like you said, it's been a game changer.
Oh
If I didn't
yeah.
have it, I wouldn't come with you anymore to Grasslands and
Yeah.
hang out with you and Mike and Rick when he comes out. So I love it. If it ever, got wrecked, I'd replace it instantly.
Yeah.
It's about $350 Canadian. So, like you said, it's not inexpensive, but when I look at what it's done to give me better sleep so that I can enjoy the astronomy, if I almost view it as an astronomy accessory, I
Yes.
think that's one of the best I've ever bought.
Yeah. Yeah, I know for sure. And kind of the straw that deflated my my support system was a cactus. I camped on a cactus one night and woke up the next day and lying on, not only on the ground but lying on a cactus, which wasn't very pleasant. And then you know I really hemmed and hawed for a number of months after that. That was like our last camping trip that year, and finally decided to bite the bullet and get this. And I was so reluctant to spend, coming from a sub $20, inflatable mattress to something that costs, like I said, more than just about any hotel I think that I've ever stayed in my life would cost for one night. To go to something like that was a pretty big step for me, for my camping, considering, I'm not really that much of a camper, but I could not get over how comfortable it was. So it did two things that were big game changers for doing astronomy for me when we go to dark sites. The first thing was I was almost never cold again. Never cold, and I can say this unequivocally, and I was never as cold again. There might be nights where I've been cool, but I don't think I've actually been really cold since I got that. And that really, really has been a huge improvement for me. And the other is that although I found like just a regular old air mattress, like for me, I'm not like the princess and the pea on the other end of the microphone here. But I really always found the Coleman's okay for comfort, but it is so comfortable that I found on average I'm sleeping between 1 and 2 extra hours a night. And when I go to bed, I fall asleep faster. It's a better sleep, and again, like I'm probably netting just about 2 more hours. So for me anyway, I find like I can get by for like especially a day on 4 or 5 hours sleep. That's no problem. Even 2 days is fine. And we're out in the wilderness like that. If I'm home, I can get by forever on 5 hours sleep. But out in the wilderness, like 2 5 hour sleeps, I'm pretty bagged by the end of it. But this was taking me to sometimes getting up to 7 hours of sleep a night, which for me that's like enough sleep. Like I only need 7 hours of sleep a night. I'm, almost never sleeping more than that anyway. So, I'm now getting full night's sleep. And, my wife would be really surprised because I come rolling home. She usually doesn't join me for these type of trips. And, she was really surprised. Like I come home, like, yeah, great. Like, what do you want to do? Like, she's like, what do you mean? Usually you go to bed right as soon as you get home. Like, no, I'm good. Like I got good sleep last night. And she would say, oh, well, it must've been cloudy. No, stayed up until 2 o'clock or whatever, slept until 8:45, got up, had breakfast, and, came home, just feel great, and it's a huge difference, Shane, I think anyway.
Yeah, totally agree. Great point about sleeping longer because I've noticed the same thing. But let's switch gears, or else we're going to get some job offers from Exped, and I like my current job. What
Go for it.
telescope are you bringing down there, Chris?
Yeah, so I'm going to bring my TAC 100. I'm going to do quite a few nights, so that's what's coming along with me this time when I do some planetary observing. And like I was saying in the last podcast, I'm going to be working on my feature constellation. So I'm going to be going through a variety of like double stars. So I need some really sharp optics and as well taking a look at some star clusters and nebulas. Take a small pair of binoculars as always. But how about yourself? What are you going to take down for a telescope?
I will be taking down my Teleview Genesis SDF and some binoculars. Yeah,
Good
that's
stuff.
it. I'm really, really tempted to take my new Takahashi just to see it perform under a dark sky. But I've done this in the past where I bring, too much gear, and
Hmm.
either I don't use some of the gear I bring, or I'm too busy going back and forth between the gear that I'm just kind of wasting time with that meddling rather than observing.
Yeah.
So one telescope, one pair of binoculars. That's my new rule, and that way I maximize my observing time, and I really don't regret that anytime I do it. So
Yeah. I'll
yeah,
also be bringing down my sketch pad and paper. So I'm kind of was getting my stuff a little bit organized last night, although I'm not going for a few days. Like I said, my plans get shifted ahead in time, unfortunately, because of the COVID-19 stuff. They have to let I guess places sit for so long. So I think you might even get a night in observing before I do. So yeah, and my nebula filters, I'll probably take maybe 4 eyepieces with me, the tack, and mount, tripod, yeah, maybe some books, my laptop, do a little writing while I'm down there.
nice, nice. Yeah, I'll take a few eyepieces too. I often don't remove like the wide field 2-inch eyepieces all that much. They kind of live in the diagonal most of the weekend, but I'll take some eyepieces that provide a little more magnification because the planets, like you mentioned, will be well positioned.
Yeah,
So I'll probably look at those a little bit if the seeing is nice. Also hoping for some good views of the comet. I like to bring a couple nebula filters like a UHC, ultra high contrast, and usually an O3 or oxygen 3 filter as well. So those really can help with some of the nebula that are, there's so many of them in the sky, and they're fun to kind of play with because they can bring out a little more detail. So definitely bring those. I'm not a sketcher, but I do bring a little writing pad so that I can capture my observing notes.
yeah,
And I think I always bring my little Sony Alpha camera, just for some daytime photography. And I'll see, I may do a little easy astrophotography, as we talked about a couple
yeah,
episodes ago.
yeah,
But this time, instead of wide field, if I do any astrophotography, I'll do a little bit more focused, or focus is a bad word to say when talking about astrophotography, because I don't
mm,
mean it in a camera focus sense, but um, some longer focal length lenses to actually look at individual objects or photograph individual objects rather than say the entire sky or a big swath of the Milky Way.
yeah.
Because there's some pretty neat things that I think would really look good on a single frame exposure.
You
The
should try
Lagoon
to get
Nebula.
yeah. Hopefully, you can get a shot of the comet.
Yeah. The comet would be fantastic, actually. So yeah, I'll bring that, and I'll probably set that up one night anyway, and capture a few photos and play around a little bit with that.
Sounds good. One of the things, and I think we've touched on this before, but especially, when we're going out camping. So some nights, like last night, I did not bring my reclining chair, and I'm glad I didn't, because just the way I oriented my car when I stopped on this side road off a side road off a side road kind of thing, um, was I was sort of on the wrong side of the car in the end, somehow. And so I was sort of looking up over my car to look at the comet. So I would have kind of had to take my chair and kind of drag it somewhere else than where I was parked, which typically I don't like to do in the middle of the night when I'm like in the middle of a field. And there was like some sort of weird animal like running around in the bushes and stuff. So, but on a trip like this, like definitely 100%, I'm taking my really good reclining lawn chair with me. And, when I first started doing these camping and observing weekends, which we used to call them in Nova Scotia, or a cow, we, I would take like just the really cheap Canadian Tire camping chair, but those are really not great for doing astronomy from, because they almost like hunch you forward. They're really not comfortable to sit in for more than, for me anyway, a very short period of time, like less than 2 hours. And they're kind of bulky, and they don't really, they just don't really work that great. So I got this reclining lawn chair from, I think it's from Eddie Bauer, or no, it's not Eddie Bauer. It's from, anyway, it doesn't matter. It's from somewhere in the States, but you can find a variety of different reclining lawn chairs. And I think part of me thinks it was like $34 American or something. So it was only maybe 2 or 3 times the cost of like a really inexpensive folding lawn chair. And these are just awesome. They fold flat. So I just put them down in my trunk, and when we're going somewhere, and I just pile everything else on top of them. And then when we are out observing, I can adjust it to be pretty far reclined, so I can look up way high in the sky, which is really easy to do when you're lying back in a lawn chair versus trying to like arch your back when you're standing. And then the other thing is, when we're just around camp, I can kind of straighten it up, and it's actually extremely comfortable to sit in. And even sometimes, like if we're staying in like a lodge or something like that, if we're observing and doing that, like if we go up to like the Cypress Hills Star Party, sometimes I've even brought it inside if we're having like a rainy day or a couple rainy days, because it's usually much more comfortable to sit in than even like the chairs or whatever they have in the hotel rooms. And typically, my wife isn't bringing such a chair with her, so she can have the nice cushy chair that is provided by the hotel. But I'm actually much happier to sit in my padded reclining lawn chair, which I can adjust just to the right level, and really enjoy that.
Oh, right on. I have a new secret weapon this year that
Oh,
I will deploy. It's a portable hammock. I'm not sure if this will be a good thing or not, but I'll give it a
this just
try.
sounds like a bad idea.
It does, doesn't it? Well, as you know, I've attempted multiple ways to try to have an afternoon nap, and it's just impossible in a tent in the sun, because
Yeah,
it's essentially a greenhouse in there.
yeah.
So I'm hoping a hammock that sways lightly in the wind will be the answer. Uh, Time will tell.
Boy, have you ever slept in a hammock before?
I've had like some casual afternoon naps in some hammocks,
Yeah,
while I'm at a friend's place having a beer, but that's the extent of it.
yeah.
Not really like long term or anything like
My grandfather, you don't know this. My grandfather used to make hammocks, and
that.
yeah, he did. He was a canvas worker. He could make anything out of canvas. Amazing guy. And so I used to sleep in a hammock for a long time.
Wow.
And man, I don't know. It always made me feel so strange. Um, I don't know what it was. He was a mariner. He was a merchant mariner, and I think that it was natural for him to sleep in a hammock, and so he'd make hammocks, and we always had a hammock up somewhere, like pretty good canvas hammock, and yeah, he loved it. I almost would find, because where I would set it up in the trees, yeah, it almost made me almost like motion sickness, but not quite. But anyway, yeah, you go to sleep well, but I don't know. I think you just need to dig a hole to sleep in out there.
Yeah, that might be that might be. So you mentioned you're looking at a lot of stuff in Scorpius. Is your plan?
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, looking at Scorpius, that's my feature constellation for the summer. Are you going to look as well?
Yeah, there's four objects on this hidden treasures list from Stephen James O'Meara. What are they here? There is X79, which is an open cluster. So that's NGC 6242. And what else here? We have the Moth wing cluster, which is a open cluster 6281.
Never heard of that. 62. Is that the one with the dark nebula nearby?
So there, I have a like a that DSS image, but it's really small on this crappy printout, so I can't really tell. It does look like there's potentially some dark nebula there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. I
Yeah.
never heard it called that before, but I'm familiar with the NGC object.
Okay. Then there's the next one here is the Phantom cluster, another open cluster, and this is NGC 6400. This one's a little
Okay.
fainter. This is an apparent magnitude of 12. So
Wow, that is faint for an open cluster.
yeah, that is. And then the last one on this list for Scorpius is the Silver Nugget cluster, which looks quite amazing, actually.
So where are you getting all these names? I'm not as big a fan of all the common names as I think you are.
Well, it's just a list that I printed out. So it's the hidden treasures list. It's all of the objects
Okay.
in O'Meara's book, and so they just put all this information associated.
Oh,
with
because I think his
objects.
theme was like, I can see that, like golden nugget, because it's a treasure, and he was going with almost like a pirate theme or something.
Could be. So this is NGC 6441.
Mm-hmm.
This one is. It looks like two globulars. Like it almost looks like the double cluster, but smaller, and the magnitude on this is 9.6. So
Wow, that's fake.
you know what? No. Sorry, I got my columns mixed up because I'm on page 2, so the column header didn't carry over. So for the previous one, the Phantom cluster that I said was magnitude 12, it's actually magnitude 8.8. And the Silver Nugget cluster is 7.2. So that's actually not too bad at all.
Okay, yeah, that's not bad, not bad at all. But yeah, looking at things that low down, as we were talking about earlier with the comet, was last night. Yeah, it can be a bit of a challenge for sure. That sounds like an interesting list, though. So
yeah,
yeah,
there's some Sagittarius objects here too that I'd like to look at. The Box Nebula, 6445.
yeah, that one's tough.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, magnitude 11.2. So that's
yeah,
fairly dim.
yeah.
There's the Dead Man's Chest. This is an open cluster with some dark nebula for sure. And this is 6520 and a magnitude of
Yeah, that one
7.6.
should be near. That one should be near M8 then.
Okay. Then we have
20.
Okay. Then 6544, which is a globular, and this is
Yes.
known as the starfish cluster, I guess.
Yeah, I've seen that one. Yeah, that's not bad.
There's actually quite a few globulars here.
Yeah, I think those objects are all in and around the Messier 8 M20 M21 complex.
Yeah. 6624 and 6723 are a couple more globulars on this list.
Mm-hmm.
And then the one that really intrigues me is this little gem nebula, 6818. It's a planetary that's magnitude 9.3. I'm quite fond of planetary nebulas, so whenever I see one of those, I definitely try to look at it.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's on my immediate list. Hopefully this weekend I'll be able to see this stuff.
Yeah, and hopefully I will whenever I get down there as well. So and I think Mike he said he might try to come down for some nights too. So but he's going to go somewhere else first. So whether or not he ends up down there or not is a little bit variable. It might happen, might not.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm pretty excited to get down to some dark skies. I was pretty happy just to get out from behind my house for a change. So yeah, looks like tonight will probably be a bust with the overcast clouds and all that kind of stuff. So one thing we might want to talk about briefly is like tents and sleeping bags, because I know we talked quite a bit about the air mattress, but I always wanted to do something more on camping gear, and I just didn't know if maybe we had the time now to do this, Shane, or should we do it at a future episode?
Um, I think we got a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Let's go for it.
So what are you using for a sleeping bag and tent?
So the tent that I'm using, and I've gone through a few different tents to get to this one. So maybe I'll talk about my trials and tribulations. The issue that I had with some other tents is I would wake up in the morning and the fly, or the kind of the cover for the tent, would be lined with condensation from my
Mm-hmm.
breath, just exhaling all night. And then I hit the zipper to unzip the tent to get out in the morning, and it basically rains on me, as all
Yeah.
this condensation falls, and it just drives me insane.
Mm-hmm.
So what I ended up settling on was or is an MSR Elixir 2, or is it Elixir 3? I can't remember. It's an MSR, so Mountain Safety Research tent. But what I love about it is the ventilation. It has these little panels on the head and the footer of the fly that you can open if you want. And it just allows for enough air to pass through I've never had any condensation in there, even on humid nights. And you don't notice the air cooling you off at all. And the other thing that I really like about it, it's like a rectangular tent. And in a lot of tents, especially like rectangular ones, the headspace can get a little narrow. But the way they've designed this tent, there's a crossbar that goes, kind of left to right, I suppose, or widthwise rather than lengthwise, right in the middle of the tent at the top, that makes it rectangular, not just from the foot, but like basically all the way to the roof. So you have outstanding head and shoulder space within this tent.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can't stand up in this tent. It's not that tall, but if you're sitting and you're changing shirts or just reading a book and sitting, it's very comfortable, and there's a lot of space. I love this tent. I'm very content with it and have no plans to replace it or upgrade it. What are you using? Because yours is definitely different.
Yeah, I have a really different tent. Actually, I'm just trying to look up to see if I can actually find the exact name of it. So I'm using what's called a Big Sky. I think mine's the Chinook 2P, and now it's 2P does not stand for two person with this tent. As you know, this thing is pretty small, even for one person. It basically fits our large Exped mats, and I got maybe 6 inches on one side for half the length of the tent, and that's it. So this is a tent that's actually, maybe I should describe the challenge I was facing, and that's that I think I've been doing a little bit more camping in the grasslands than you have over the years. I think that's probably fair to say.
Yeah, you've logged a few more nights for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing that I was finding is, well, if I go, I'm going to go even if the weather looks really bad. And so I was having some struggles just with how bad the weather can be down there. I've been in windstorms at over 100 kilometers an hour, and had my tent like blowing flat, and been in some hailstorms that were pretty bad, and had actually gone through a couple tents, one from wind and one from hail. And so I really looked around. I looked at getting a fairly high-end tent for my, I guess, third or fourth tent now, since we started doing this about 8 or 9 years ago. And if I'm going through a several $100 tent every 2 or 3 years, I thought, well, why not spend twice that amount and hopefully get a tent that will last me a little bit longer, but then also perform much better when I'm in those adverse conditions. So I originally looked at the Hilleberg tents, and I almost bought one of those, but they seemed a little bit, well, they are really expensive, and that's a little bit costly. And I'm always looking for, to save a few dollars where I can. People might get that sense from me, just the way I like to do things. And I read a lot of reviews online, good and bad, of the Hilleberg, and generally they are very good, but the cost is a lot. And then there's a few reviews of these Big Sky tents, and in general, people say, well, they're really close to the Hillebergs, and they're super fast to put up and very easy to put up for the most part. And that really attracted me, because I'm not like someone who's been camping my whole life. I basically camped to do astronomy, and then I've probably camped, half a dozen times outside of doing astronomy. But I do a lot of camping for astronomy. But I'm not looking to kind of go and go through and set up a tent as like part of what I'm doing for the weekend. That's just what I'm doing. So I have a place to stay when I'm done doing astronomy. And these tents are I forget what it's called, but it's this material. It's a silicon nylon, and it almost is like a rubber. And it's a 3-pole design, and the tent is good for around 120 kilometer an hour winds. And I think you've seen that tent in close to 80 or 90 kilometer an hour winds, and it doesn't budge.
Yeah. There was one day when we were in Grasslands and it was blowing 50 to 60 kilometers per hour with gusts of, probably 70 to 90.
Yeah.
And I just sat, near our camp watching our tents. And I was just like, your tent was sort of it wasn't bowed in, but you could see where the wind was really hitting it.
Yeah.
And I was expecting at some point it would collapse, but it deflected the wind and it was no big deal for your tent.
Yeah, and I've slept in the tent in 80 kilometer hour winds before, and it starts to get a bit ruckus in there. But I was able to sleep. It would wake me up once in a while when it was gusting up to 90, but that you can actually sleep in a tent at 80, I think is a pretty good a pretty good recommendation. They make a variety of tents. Some of them are just 2-pole or whatever. The 3-pole really is what locks it in and makes it actually looks almost like a suction cup. But what's different about this tent and what makes it so strong is it actually has, I think as you'll recall, I think it looks pretty cool. Some people might not like the look. It's a 2-skin tent, but it's got an exoskeleton. So your poles are on the outside of the tent. And then there's your fly that straps into, and then below that is the tent body itself. And I went with sort of the exact opposite of you. For whatever reason, I guess I must not expel as much moisture at night. And so I seldom have had a problem with moisture in any tent, even really only in really, really cheap tents have I had any kind of moisture problem. Typically for me, it's the cold, and I don't like to get dust in because, that will bother my lungs because I'm sensitive there. So with this tent, it only has a couple small vents in the top that you have to leave open because it can get so warm in there, just from your body heat, even close to 0 degrees, that you do want to leave those vents open. But it's extremely comfortable in there, and with 2 walls between you and the outside environment, you feel like much more secure against any weather that is going to roll in. And I've certainly weathered a few storms in it now. It is separating on one of the seams where the seam meets the zipper in one spot. So I'm not sure how many more years I'll get out of it, but I've been really happy with it. And I think I can just buy, like, one of the neat things about these custom setups is that I think you can just buy the parts. So I can just buy like if it's the shell that tears, I can just buy the shell. I don't have to buy like the poles and the body and the stakes and all that kind of stuff all over again. I can just spend maybe 100 or a couple $100 max and just replace whatever part comes, apart from where. And, I think because I set up in the same spots every time and I'm always facing one side into that wind, like you were saying, I think that it's just getting a lot of wear in that one spot. So anyway, but it seems to be holding fine still. It just looks a little thin in one area. And then do you want to talk about sleeping bags next?
Yeah, sure.
So go ahead. You got a really big, heavy sleeping bag.
Yeah, I started with like the mummy style bag, but because I'm a side sleeper, they're really inconvenient. And the other thing that I started doing was, rather than sleeping in a zipped up sleeping bag, I only do that on the coldest of nights now. What I like to do is just unzip the entire sleeping bag and use it like a comforter, like I would at home.
Yeah.
And I just feel like that is the ultimate, because it's like you're at home. You have all the freedom in the world.
Yeah.
So what I ended up buying is a Cabela's Mountain Trapper sleeping bag. It's rated to minus 18 degrees Celsius or 0 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's extremely warm, but I find I'm able to regulate my temperature quite well throughout the night. And I love it. And the best thing about Cabela's branded stuff is it's usually made quite well, but it's very affordable.
Yeah.
Like this thing is on sale right now for $135 Canadian, and I'm not sure if I would ever look for anything else. It's a really nice bag.
So the bag that I use for camping, and again, like it might seem odd that we're talking so much about camping gear, but this is really critical for having good observing experiences. And I think we're almost down to like really, although this stuff may seem a bit on the expensive side, like if you are doing it like we are, where we're doing it pretty much every new moon from maybe even as early as April into trying to do October, maybe we'll get there eventually. So we're out often, more than a dozen, maybe dozens of nights a year. I've certainly logged 3 or 4 dozen nights one summer when I was off, and so we're getting lots of use out of this. And um, as well, if you think about what you'd spend on any sort of hotel, even the absolute cheapest hotel, we would have spent multiples of what we've spent on our camping gear thus far. So what I use for a bag is actually not a sleeping bag at all whatsoever. I use what's called a camping quilt, and this is a somewhat recent development in the high end camping world. So I was using just the standard, and there's nothing wrong with them, the standard North Face mummy style bag. And there was a few things I didn't care for with it. One is I found like I could never quite get my pillow and the bag to work really well together. It was always really futzy trying to get in and get everything squared away. And so it's really late, you're cold, you just want to get into the bag and start warming up. And I'd spend maybe 5 or 6 minutes trying to sort myself out while I'm, trying to go to sleep. I didn't care for that at all. And it wouldn't matter whether it was North Face or somebody else's bag, same thing. And again, I was sleeping on the air mattress, and those mummy bags on an air mattress is a bad combination. And I also didn't like the constriction that you feel. I just wanted to be able to stretch out a little bit more. Like we're not hardcore camping, so it's not like we're going out and hiking all day. So we need to pack things down really small. So we just don't need that weight savings. We're just unloading from a car and going a max of maybe 15 or 20 feet to set up our camps, and typically not even that far. So the gear that we're getting isn't necessarily required to be ultralight, but I actually end up getting an ultralight quilt bag that only weighs, I think it weighs like 8 or 9 ounces, and it's pretty incredible what this bag does. I actually have it sitting right next to me here. I've used it a lot, even outside of camping. I was really sick with the flu a couple of years ago, and had those terrible chills, and it definitely was very helpful to get me through that. But this bag didn't cost any more than like a high-end bag from North Face or Marmot or anybody else provides. In fact, I think it was a little bit less expensive. It's a custom bag, so I wanted it to be long, and I'll use bag interchangeably. So the way this works is it's basically like a quilt, but then they sew the bottom up. You can actually choose not to have the bottom sewn up, but I did because my feet tend to get a bit cold, and I just like to be able to get under it and then put my feet into that. It kind of keeps it anchored around me. And then there's different straps you can use to sort of affix it to your camping mattress. Although I haven't really done that as much. But it just makes for a great experience. It's more like just a regular blanket than like a sleeping bag. It's basically like a foot box, I think they call it, and then the rest is just like a nice quilt that you can kind of wrap around yourself. And unlike a regular sleeping bag, Shane, I don't know if you ever noticed this, but if your bag says -7, what temperature is it typically good to?
I don't know, +20.
Yeah, like maybe +7 if you're lucky.
Yeah.
And so it's always been a challenge to line up the actual temperature rating of the bag to the actual temperature rating outside. This company, they were adamant when I ordered from them that they were very accurate in their temperature rating. So I told them my exact conditions, that often I would go down to, typically in grasslands at night, like you said, 10 degrees to 0 degrees a lot of the time, and then the odd time we're down to as much as -5. So I told them this. I told them exactly how I like to sleep, and they made it exactly for me, for the conditions that I'm observing in, for what I'm doing, and how I like to sleep. And I've never slept better. In fact, arguably, I would say between the Exped mat and this bag is by Bandit. Yeah, I would say that I sleep better in this setup than I do in my bed at home, which I actually don't care for my bed at home anyway. I would rather sleep on the Exped mat and under this sleeping bag than in the majority of beds that I've ever slept in my life. It is the most comfortable setup that I've ever slept in, regardless. So it's very warm. I was somebody who was suffering not from discomfort like you were, but I was getting too cold and thinking that I was going to have to end these kind of sessions on any night that was forecast to be below +10. Just because we're out at night, we get cold. For me, for whatever reason, my temperature just continues to drop, and I can never seem to get it back again. And if I went to bed at sunset like a normal person, it's fine. Like I've done that on nights where it's been cloudy, and that's no problem. But whereas we're staying up, until the wee hours when it's really cold, and by that point I'm frozen anyway. I was just like really struggling. So between the Chinook Big Sky Chinook tent, which is double walled and just has small vents in the top, not really good if you're going to be out in any place that's going to be warmer than about 10 degrees at night. It's definitely too warm in those conditions. I've done that, and I just sleep without any blankets in those cases. But between that tent, the Exped mat, and then the Bandit bag, boy, I'll tell you, it is extremely, extremely comfortable, and the observing is a lot better. It used to feel like, you were just running yourself down, or at least that's how it felt to me. I was running myself down. I was getting too cold and kind of coming home tired and miserable at the end of a weekend. Although I'd have fun observing, after a couple nights, 3 nights max, I was really just done and just not having fun anymore. But with this setup, I'm pretty good for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. I think through this discussion, one way to sum it up is comfort is king when you're doing some of these trips, and it should not be ignored because the astronomy and staying up late and camping in general really put a lot of stresses on just your energy and mental state. So if you can take care of some of these other things to provide some comfort, it really goes a long way to enjoying the whole weekend.
Yeah. Well, I think that what you just said there is a really great summary. So I didn't know if you have anything else to add, Shane.
That is all, my friend.
Okay. Well, how can people stay in touch with us?
They can reach us on Twitter. We are at Actual Astronomy, or you can reach out over email. We are actualastronomy@gmail.com.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, and thanks everybody for listening.